1 year ago. Me.
Opposition? Zugzwang? Triangulation? Oh, the endgame sounds worse than trigonometry.
Me now.
Oh, this is simple. We triangulate in order to get him in Zugzwang, and then it's just a matter of opposition to win the game. Do you also want to go from
2?
Then this is the video for you. Not only will you sound like an endgame master.
Oh, this position is simple. We triangulate to put him in Zugzwang and use the opposition and outflank him, and after that we simply use a breakthrough to win, and then the square of the pawn decides the game. So smart, right?
You will also have a firm grasp on endgame concepts which you can use anywhere and everywhere in the endgame. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Hey friends, my name is Ishan, and today we'll be looking at some of the basic endgame terminology that you must know in order to have a firm understanding of the endgame. First up on our list is opposition. Here's a fancy textbook definition. Opposition is the state of two kings standing on the same rank, file or diagonal with an odd number of squares separating them. To get the opposition is to achieve such a state with the opponent's turn to move. If that went right above your head, let me explain. When there are 1, 3 or 5 squares between the kings and it is the opponent's move to play, we say that you have the opposition. Clear? So, in this position, it's white to play. Who has the opposition? Let me know in the comments below. If you said black, then you are correct. It is white's turn to play, so black has the opposition as there are an odd number of squares separating the kings. I hope this is clear. Let's move on to number 2. Zugzwang. It is a situation where every possible move weakens the position, so there is no good move to make. Zugzwang literally translates to compulsion to move. In this example, we can see that black has no good move to play, as wherever he moves, his pawn will be inevitably lost. And so will his game. So we say that black is in Zugzwang. Let me just show you why. These are all the possible moves that black has, but all of them hang this pawn. So black loses inevitably. I hope this is clear, guys. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, passed pawns. Now, don't freak out about the lack of kings. This is just a demonstration, so I don't need to put kings on the board. By definition, a passed pawn is a pawn which has a clear path to promotion. If another pawn, and not a piece, if only another pawn is either controlling or directly in the way of the pawn, then that pawn isn't passed. For example, here we can see that the a3 square is controlled by the b4 pawn. So the a2 pawn isn't passed, as if we push a4, he will take en passant and we'll lose our pawn. Can you tell me 2 passed pawns in this situation? Yes, the h2 and c5 pawns are definitely 100% passed. And I don't mean the test kind, the chess kind. The d5 and d6 pawn block each other directly, so neither is passed. Moving on to number 4. Fourth on our list is the outside passed pawn, a distant cousin of the passed pawn. Get the joke? Cause outside, distant. Never mind. The outside passed pawn is a passed pawn. That's obvious, I mean it is. But it is usually located on the edge of the board, far, far away from all the action. It is used as a decoy or a distraction. So while the opponent focuses on trying to stop and capture the outside passed pawn, we can gobble up his other pawns. Let me show you an example. In this position, we can clearly see that the only passed pawn on the board is the h2 pawn. And since all the other pawns are on the queen side, this pawn becomes an outside passed pawn. So, a logical move for white would be h4, when after king d7 h5, king e7 h6, and now king f7, he does manage to stop the pawn, but at the cost of all his queenside pawns. Because now we can play king a4, when after king g6, king a5, king into h6, and king into b4, we have a passed pawn, which will be the decider of this game. Moving on to number 5. So number 5 on our list of endgame terminologies you must know is key squares. As the name suggests, these squares are key in attaining victory. We could rephrase that to key squares are the squares on occupation of which the strongest side wins, regardless of whose turn to move. Basically, if you land on a key square, victory is certain. The key squares for a pawn on the 4th rank or below, 5th rank or above if you're black, are 2 ranks ahead of it, including the adjacent files. So as you can see on the board, we have a pawn on b4, so it is on the 4th rank. And the key squares are highlighted in green, a6, b6 and c6, since they are 2 ranks ahead of the pawn and include the adjacent files. I hope this is clear. Let's move on. For a pawn above the 4th rank, the key squares are the 6 squares in front of it, 3 files by 2 ranks. So white wins inevitably here, as he is already on a key square. There is an exception, however. These rules do not apply to the rook pawns, also known as the A and H pawns. Since there is no space beside them, as they are the last files on the board, there are a lot of situations where it leads to stalemate. Thus, there are very low chances for victory. There aren't any defined key squares for these pawns. It depends from situation to situation. So you will have to calculate it based on the situation on the board. Let's go to number 6. The 6th terminology that we'll be looking at is the square of the pawn. This is simply a time-saving technique used to calculate whether a passed pawn will manage to promote without help from its king. Now I will draw the square and show you. So in this case, the pawn is on b3. So to draw the square, all we have to do is simply draw a diagonal from the pawn to the edge of the board, which will be b3 to g8. Then what we do is we pull the line back to the g3 and b8 squares, as these will be the next corners of our square, and we simply connect them with our pawn. So we have formed a square here. How to use this square? Well, in your calculations, once you've drawn the square, if it's black to move, check whether black can enter into the square on the next move or not. If not, then your pawn can promote without help from its king. If yes, then I'm afraid he will manage to stop your pawn. If it's your turn to play, check whether black is already in the square or not. If not, then you can simply push your pawn and make sure he stays out of it. Whereas if he is, then I'm afraid again he can stop your pawn. In this case, it's white to play. So after playing b4, the new square is now, as you can see, it has gotten a little smaller, and unfortunately the black king is just out of the square. So as he tries to get in, we push again. He tries to get in again, we push again. He tries to get in, we push. And just as he's about to stop our pawn, we promote and win the game. Understood? Now normally what you would have to do is you would have to calculate tediously all the moves in your head, like okay, b4, king g4, b5, king f5. With the square of the pawn rule, you can do that in way lesser time, thus helping you to calculate more efficiently. there is one thing you need to be careful of. It is black to play here, and it looks like he can step into the square and draw the game. But is it so? Black logically plays king g4, stepping into the square. But after a4, lo and behold, the white pawn manages to queen. But how? You see, whenever the pawn is on the starting rank, we must draw the square from one square ahead of the pawn. So, we would have to draw the square from here, since we did not take into account that the pawn can move 2 squares on the first move. We'll have to draw the square like this, and as we can clearly see, the black king is nowhere near to entering the square. Thus, it was a win from the start. That's it for today. I hope you liked this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe so I can keep making more content like this. Till then, see you in the next video. Bye.